For as long as Pax Christi International has existed, which is almost 75 years now, Pax Christi has had a commitment to nonviolence, nonviolence as a personal practice, but also as a practice in the world. A few years ago, we began to ask our member organizations around the world, mostly local groups, to help us understand what that looks like. What does it mean? Especially for people living in contexts of significant violence. And we began to gather stories and develop a deeper understanding of what nonviolence in practice might look like. Over and over again in recent years, and really over many years, every time the world has moved toward war, Pax Christi has said, war is not the answer. We need to go in another direction. But what we began to realize in the last 8 or 9 years is that we are very ill prepared as a global community to respond in other ways to threats of violence than to use more violence. So what I'd like to describe today is the Catholic Nonviolence Initiative, which is a project of Pax Christi International that is intended to help move nonviolence to the center of Catholic practice and understanding. By nonviolence, we mean personal spirituality, a way of life, the ground for interpersonal and local community relationships, but also as a set of very powerful tools for dealing with very violent situations in the world. So for a set of tools for transforming conflict, for protecting local communities, for promoting a just peace. About 5 years ago, we began to ask the Catholic Church to deepen its understanding of nonviolence at every level and to recommit to the practice of nonviolence across the board. We believe that nonviolence describes very well the practice and the message of Jesus when you understand the context in which he was living and his consistent movement toward nonviolent ways of dealing in a local community. His invitation of everyone to the table to build the beloved community, for example, was his way of pushing back even on the violence of occupation. We believed that the Catholic Church, which has a tremendous worldwide reach, could make a very significant difference in how the world understands and uses the practice of nonviolence to change the way we are in the world. So we began an ongoing dialogue with the Vatican, as well as with Catholic universities, Catholic religious communities, bishops, local dioceses, seminaries, Catholic communications, and even the diplomatic corps and the advocacy capacity of Catholic religious orders to both study what is nonviolence, what does it look like, how do we practice it, what does it mean, how can we understand it to be much broader than crossing a line or chaining yourself to a fence, but actually to include a spectrum of practices from diplomacy to trauma healing to restorative justice to unarmed civilian protection to how we relate to each other at a very personal and interpersonal level. We began to encourage just a deeper thinking about nonviolence, and now the Catholic Nonviolence Initiative is in a very active engagement with Catholic communities around the world who we think are, that together we're beginning to see that nonviolence could actually help us move from a paradigm in the world where our assumption is that violence will always be present and that the only way to respond to violence is with greater violence. What we know is that that doesn't work. We've seen it over and over and over again. What we believe is that a much greater understanding of and commitment to nonviolent practices, to nonviolence as a way of life, to studying the impact of nonviolent responses, even in very difficult situations, will help us move to a new paradigm where our assumption is that we can transform conflict before it becomes violent. We can protect communities if we invest in the tools to do that in advance. The United States is a great example where we spend $750 billion a year preparing for war, training people to fight war, and on. And we spend a pittance investing in what would be probably very powerful, proven powerful nonviolent tools for dealing with violence and conflict. So the Catholic Nonviolence Initiative, a project of Pax Christi International, is working with many other organizations and the Church herself to try to move in that direction.